The best runners and even sprinters in the world share one thing in common when it comes to their movement and technique. And what's great is this isn't only relevant to high-level athletes. It also matters a lot for you in your own daily life as well. In this video, I'm going to break it down and help show you how you can improve it and integrate it within your own life for less pain and better movement. The key lies in the timing between what we call extension of the hip and the knee. You see, when we're moving through the world, what needs to happen is that our leg needs to move underneath ourselves, and the knee needs to lock out at about the same point, but not exactly at the same point. The timing between what we call extension or straightening of the hip and the knee needs to occur at the right time, or else significant compensations can build up and performance can decrease or be inhibited. I commonly see this quality missing in a lot of people that have low back and knee pain in particular. So if this sounds familiar to you, then you might want to try working on this stuff and seeing how you feel when you move after. As we're moving through the world in the gait cycle and even the running cycle to a more magnified extent, what needs to happen is that one leg is out in front of the other and we begin to need to pull our body weight over to that side. What that entails is that the hip and knee both need to start extending or straightening around the same point in the gait cycle, around 15% of it when the leg is out in front of us. But what has to happen is that the hip needs to extend or move behind us more and faster than the knee needs to lock out. So there's more of an excursion of range of motion for the hip to extend, meaning that it needs to come underneath us and then even slightly behind us. So that way we can then push off of that leg and begin the process of loading the other side. However, the problem occurs when we lack this hip extension. When we lack the hip extension, what happens is we can't effectively time the ability and move through the full excursion of range of motion to bring our leg underneath us. So what happens is that the knee locks out too early. And if this happens, we have a limited ability to actually move into hip extension. So what's going to happen is that we're going to actually end up just arching our back like this and moving through low back extension to substitute the idea of bringing the leg behind us. You can see how that would work. If I just arch my back, it can help me move my leg further back in space, but that's not the leg actually moving relatively back compared to the position of the hip. That's just the spine pushing down towards the ground, which is pushing the leg back. So over time, this is just our spine working to create that extension because we're limited in that hip extension mechanic. Now you may be wondering, well, what causes a limitation of hip extension? Well, a lot of us are pretty sedentary, so we sit all day in a position of hip flexion. We're not really active, getting enough steps throughout our day and expressing this quality of hip extension. We're not moving in multiple planes throughout the day of movement, side to side, rotationally, so it's really use it or lose it thing. But the primary thing I think as to why this gets limited is constant sitting and sedentary life. Now let's apply this to high-level athletes and runners. Here are a couple of examples of high-level runners illustrating this. So you can see that this athlete right here is doing a great job of making sure that the leg gets underneath the hip before the knee starts straightening out. And this is a great example of how the hip should get straight or the knee should get underneath the hip before it starts fully straightening out. Now let's compare a side by side. So look at the runner on the left versus the right. The runner on the left clearly looks more fluid than the one on the right, but both are high-level athletes. What do you notice about the differences between the one on the left and the right? Well, the one on the left, one reason why you're seeing that they look more fluid is for the purposes of what we're talking about. You're seeing that leg move underneath the body nicely without the knee too straight. But the runner on the right, what you're seeing is that this person is striking the ground already with a relatively straighter knee, and they continue to straighten their knee before they achieve a good amount of hip extension. So the only way they can really move into more hip extension is to substitute their low back maybe a little bit more than they should, and I'm sure their running mechanics could be smoothed out a little bit better if they were to work on what we're talking about here. And this doesn't apply just to walking or running too. This also applies to lifting weights. Let's use the deadlift as an example. If you are going to properly leverage your glutes and your hamstrings to extend your hip and straighten you out, stand you up, then you need to not lock out your knees too early, because if you do, then you're going to move into a position where you can't leverage your glutes and hamstrings as hip extensors as effectively anymore, and now you're going to have to use your low back to shove you forward, and that's definitely not ideal. This applies to squats as well. It's just the timing is a little bit different because it's a different movement pattern, but hopefully you're understanding the point that this has a lot of carryover to many aspects of our life. So the question is how can you get an idea for how limited you are in hip extension? Well, what you can do is a basic Thomas test. So you can lay off the edge of a table. I don't really recommend a soft bed because this is not going to work and you're just going to sink into the bed. You're not going to get an accurate representation, but try to find like a coffee table or something you can lay totally flat on. And what you're going to do is hug your knees to your chest to the point where you don't feel a pinch in your hips, but you're at like a comfortable end range there. And then what you're going to do is allow one leg to just drop, stopping at the point where you have to push more than about a 1 out of 10 to get it to drop. More than that, you're not actually assessing your genuine hip extension range of motion at that point. And you should be able to get your hamstring to fully touch the end of that table. If you can't, then you're probably limited in hip extension to some extent. And this is a very general test to give you a very general idea, just to be clear. If this has helped you understand your body and movement in a way you haven't considered before, it would mean a lot to me on the channel if you could like, but also don't forget to subscribe. I release new videos like this every single week. Now I'm going to show you 3 different variations of exercises that can be used to improve hip extension, starting with the easiest variation, moving on to the most challenging and upright. And what you'll notice in all of these is that the hip is extending more than the knee, and the knee is staying in a slightly bent position. But there's a lot more that could go into why we're limited in hip extension. For example, if you have an asymmetrical pelvis, then you can work on hip extension all day long, but if you can't effectively turn towards that side, then you're always going to be limited in hip extension. This is why my beginner body restoration program is such a good option for so many people, because it can be individualized to your own asymmetries and imbalances. And it gives you an easy progress program over multiple phases and weeks that can be used to improve your movement quality, your posture, and also reduce pain. Check it out down below in the description for more. What's great about this first one is that it's just like the test that you did, that Thomas test. But you want to, again, don't use a soft bed, find something firm you can lay on. This works really well if you use the right amount of height for what you need. So you should have an idea. I'd probably film yourself on that test, get a good idea for how short you are. And you want to support yourself to the point where the amount of elevation that you have, a foam roller is generally good for a lot of people to start, but you want to be like, if you were short, right around here on that Thomas test, you want to be just above that. So that way you have a little bit of space to press down into. You want this underneath your upper hamstring, but not your glute. You want to make sure that everything stays in line. So you have your knees in line with your hips and also your feet, and you're going to either do one of 2 things. You can keep one leg resting right here, and that should allow your whole back to be flat and relaxed as you allow your chin to be passively pointed at the ceiling here. That's the key, is how much elevation do you need to where you can keep your low back 100% flat and relaxed as you're keeping everything in line. You don't have to force your back flat, it just naturally is flat without you having to do anything. And then what you're gonna do is very gently push down into that foam roller with that leg that's being supported right there. This other leg is just hanging out, not really doing anything. And you can just breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth, just a 4 or 5 out of 10 effort, and you're just gonna do this for about 10-ish breath cycles. If you wanna get a little bit more dissociation between sides, and this can be helpful for more people, is that you can hug the back of your hamstring like this. Don't do this and pull it as close as you can. Keep this knee pointing directly at the ceiling, go right here and very gently push down, but don't rotate your body. Everything still stays in line. If you can't handle this, that's okay, just do that first variation. On progressive sets, after your first or second one, what you could do is lower it a little bit, because now you'll have more access to that end range of hip extension. So you could use something a little bit lower to train yourself to work deeper into that range, like a towel rolled up like this. And you can, again, keep your foot right here and just press down, or you could hug back here. But again, your low back should always be flat and relaxed at all times without you having to try to do that. And there are definitely some of you watching this video that are gonna need even more support than just a foam roller. You might need to stack multiple things on top of each other, but it should feel stable. Now that you have more hip extension range of motion, this should feel more easy than it would have otherwise. So you're gonna get in this position, foam roller underneath your foot, toes straight up at the ceiling. You wanna feel the 3 points of contact, your foot of your heel, base of the big toe, base of the little toe, but your whole foot is as relaxed as it can be. You're not trying to create any tension, you're just gonna create pressure through the wall. Your knee is going to be 10% unlocked on this leg. Now this leg is going to be brought back just so that way the knee is pointing up at the ceiling or around that level, maybe a tiny bit less, but no more than right about here. And you should feel no tension in your hip for the most part. Maybe a little bit of your hip flexion to hold it in that position, but that's it. And now your chin's going to be passively pointed at the ceiling, hands on the low rib cage, and make sure, again, your back is nice and flat and relaxed, especially your low back. And what you're going to do is push
into that wall with your inner heel and base of the big toe without losing the outside foot. And you're gonna feel a little bit of your low back flatten out down into the ground. If you want, sometimes it helps to slightly pull down into the foam roller as well to get a little bit of hamstring involved. But for the most part, it's a push into the wall. And you're just feeling the pressure work of the foot pressing against the ground to create that relative hip extended position. And you're gonna take your opposite hand of the leg that's pulled back and you're gonna reach it towards the ceiling. You breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth for about 10 slow breath cycles, feeling that connection between your foot very gently pressing into the wall, like a 4 out of 10, maybe even a 3. And you breathing through this position, working in that hip extension. This is a nice static exercise that mimics actions of the gait and running cycle that can help prep you for either running or walking better, but also the next exercise.
Now this last one is more dynamic, and what we're gonna do is start in this position with our shins parallel with the ground. You're gonna feel those same 3 points of contact on the side that you're gonna work. So you're gonna pull one leg back, and you're gonna hug the back of that hamstring, not like this, but like this, just a little bit. Again, your knee's probably gonna be a little bit further back than pointed towards the ceiling, but you should never feel any pinch in the front of your hip ever. So play around with it and keep it in line with your hip. You don't want it diving off to the side there. And then what you're gonna do is first push into the wall a little bit and create a little bit of an association between your glute working, maybe a little bit of your upper hamstring, but mostly your glute. And you push into the wall with those 3 points of contact, but especially your inner heel and base of the big toe. Notice how my foot is relaxed and I'm gripping it into the wall. I'm just getting a sensation for that glute connection to the foot there. Then once I've established that, I'm going to exhale through my mouth gently as I push off of the ground, lifting one vertebrae at a time. Notice how my tailbone lifted off the ground, but my low back remains flat. I'm gonna hang out in this position, keep feeling that connection with a relaxed foot, chin pointed at the ceiling, neck is relaxed, and then I'm gonna inhale, hold the position. Exhale, go up just 1 or 2 vertebrae higher. And I'm progressively working myself into this end range of hip extension. I'm gonna go through more and more and more reps, slowly, 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 until I get to the point where if I were to go any higher, I would have to arch my back, or I would lose connection of my foot on the wall, or my glute would stop working as much. But really, you're gonna feel like you're not gonna be able to go up any higher without some sort of compensation happening. Stop at that point, go back down to the ground, and then reset. And keep going through very slow breaths. It might take you up to 10 breaths to get to the top position if you're going nice and slow, one vertebrae at a time, or it might take you just like 3 or 4. It depends on how much hip extension you genuinely have access to. But this should help it get better over time, and eventually you'll get up into this end range. We feel a nice stretch on this hip flexor right here, and you'll really feel that nice connection of the foot into the wall, driving you into hip extension.
And again, one thing to look out for is the ribs flaring. Don't let those ribs flare. Keep them down, one vertebrae at a time off of the ground. For maximum success, I recommend finding the 2 exercises out of these 3 that improve your tests the most. If you want to do all 3, then more power to you. It'll just take you longer. But if you're short on time, find the 2 that work the best. And I would do them both in the morning and at night for about 2 sets each of about 10-ish breath cycles per exercise. Do that every day for a couple of weeks, and then you can back off to maybe once a day. But you should notice immediately after that you're moving more fluidly and you're not using your low back as much when you walk or you run. And your knees also might thank you as well. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.